Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen Bennett, LLG's Executive Director of Policy and Governance, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
Now, I hope it's not too hot for you, Dennis. I think that's churlish. But now, in case you missed it, the government made an announcement that all local authorities operating under the committee's model will need to change to a cabinet and leader model, and regulations are already upon us, but more of that later in the podcast. Now, Dennis, let's start with a look at finance.
Well, indeed, because there's been a clutch of key policy statements on local government finance. The government has announced plans to overhaul the funding methodology for local government and to push back the expiration date for the dedicated schools grant statutory override by a year. In a consultation on the changes launched last week, the Ministry for Housing, Communities and Local Government also detailed proposals to scrap existing competitive bidding processes that councils often have to go through for small pots of money. And the 8-week consultation sets out how Whitehall plans to make funding allocations fairer for councils of all sizes and across all parts of England. This is a truly radical sea change in the way finance will be redistributed between local authorities in the future. The consultation asks for views on plans to recognise the remoteness of areas and account for the additional costs in delivering services in rural places. And there are also proposals to ensure that deprivation is recognised in the assessment of need of councils, so that services that support the poorest in communities are properly funded. And on social care, the consultation suggests updating the formula that is used to work out funding for local authorities which provide adult social care, so that it properly reflects the demands of our ageing population.
Well, the government have said, I believe, that these changes come alongside previously announced plans to reform children's social care and the special education needs and disabilities system, and it announced the dedicated schools grant statutory override, and that helps councils, or is intended to help councils manage SEND costs, will stay in place until the end of 2027-28 in order to assist the reforms. And in addition, the government have said that it will introduce a bespoke formula to recognise home to school transport costs. I know that they take a lot of the budget of local authorities. And apparently this move comes after the Public Accounts Committee issued a report on local government funding that raised fears that without the statutory override, quote, many local authorities are at risk of effectively going bankrupt.
Elsewhere, the consultation revealed plans to reset the business rates retention system to incentivise local authorities to help their local economies grow by better matching the system to local need. In a written statement, on the reforms, Local Government Minister Jim McMahon said, "We took our first steps to reform local government funding through the Local Government Finance Settlement for 2025 to 26, and now we are publishing a consultation on the next stage of our plans." As part of this, he said, the formulae used to assess local authorities' current needs, which are a decade out of date, will be updated to target money where it needs to go, and to ensure that those places that have been overlooked get their fair share.
Well, I took a look at this, and on the fairer funding review, McMahon said the government plans to move around $2 billion of funding to the places and communities that need it most and modernise council tax administration. And he added that the last time the funding was allocated to local authorities using an updated set of funding formulae, that sought to account for local authority differences in demand, costs and council tax rising ability, was in 2013-2014.
Indeed, and he went on that this failure to update since then and the subsequent mismatch between funding and need has manifested itself in unequal outcomes for people and places. And McMahon added that the proposed changes to council tax would aim to end unacceptable aggressive collection practices in relation to council tax avoidance. Now, the consultation on the Fair Funding Review will be open for 8 weeks, closing on the 15th of August. And a separate consultation has been launched on council tax modernisation, which is open for 12 weeks and closes on the 12th of September. Helen.
It's fascinating, Dennis, isn't it? When I stop to think about this, when you, in any other situation where you owe money and you haven't paid, nobody, and I recall this once at the magistrates court, no judge is ever saying to you, bring your toothbrush, relatively early on in the proceedings, because most civil debt takes a while to enforce, and there are different ways of doing it. It will be one to watch, and interesting to read the consultation responses, actually.
It is, and the government clearly is determined to make change in this important area of collection.
Well, let's stick with the minister and return to the headline that I mentioned at the start of the Grapevine. So, on the 24th of June, Jim McMahon announced that government plans to legislate, and this was a ministerial statement, by the way, the government plans to legislate to abolish the committee system, requiring those councils currently operating this model to transition to the leader and cabinet model, which the vast majority of councils in England already currently operate, he said, because this will simplify the governance system and ensure all councils operate an executive form of governance, providing clarity on responsibility and accountability and improving efficiency in decision-making, and that this change will provide clearer, more easily understood structures at a local level, improving efficiency and preventing authorities from wasting taxpayer funds on needless changes to systems of governance. And the law already allows for and requires overview and scrutiny arrangements to be in place. And then very quickly, the legislation hit in the form of the Local Authorities Referendums and Elections of Mayors, England Amendment Regulations 2025, number 746. I believe on the 26th of June, but it might have actually been quicker because I was refreshing all the time on legislation.gov.uk, but they came out and here they are.
Indeed, Helen, it's all been fast and furious from what I can see. Now let's look at the explanatory note to the draft. It says that the government intends to include measures in a bill to be introduced this session to abolish the committee system, as you say, and to require all local authorities in England to operate that executive cabinet model of governance. All local authorities which currently operate the committee system will be required to transition to the leader and cabinet model, as you've explained. In addition, to avoid potential confusion for the public caused by the establishment of new mayors for strategic authorities and councils, provisions in the bill will prevent the establishment of any new council mayoralties. However, the provisions will not abolish the 13 legacy council mayoralties. The measures to be included in the bill will hold any ongoing processes to change council governance models, such as petitions, referendums and mayoral resolutions, and will cancel any inaugural mayoral elections. This statutory instrument will also extend the period within which a council, in receipt of a valid petition for a governance change, is required to hold a referendum, and it will push back by 1 year the date on which a mayoral election is to be held, following a resolution or referendum result in favour of a council moving to a mayor and cabinet model.
Well, the government states this is to prevent the cost and uncertainty to local authorities and residents of holding a referendum or mayoral election while Parliament is considering the bill. And the effect of the regulations taken together with the bill, if approved by Parliament, is that a governance referendum need not be held and an inaugural mayoral election will not take place well either poll is not already scheduled by the date the instrument comes into force. It comes into force, I believe, on the 18th of July, and I think, I could be wrong, but I think Plymouth Council was due to hold a referendum potentially on the 16th or 17th. Of all the current local authorities in England, there are 13 under Mayor and Cabinet, as you mentioned, Dennis, but there are, I believe, 38 under the committee system currently. And I think it's fair to say that no one saw this coming. Certainly those authorities, I believe the Isle of Wight, that have only just changed to the committee structure. What the government says about that, though, is that in the English devolution white paper, section 4.2.31, the government committed to bring in consistent and accountable structures across local government by considering which governance models available to local authorities will best support their decision making. Now, I must have missed the subtlety of that one, Dennis, and I don't think I'm the only one.
No.
But let's return to finance.
Well, yes, this is interesting as well. The government has launched a national housing bank that will see more than 500,000 homes built with the help of the 16 billions of new public investment. Announcing the new institution, the Treasury and the local government ministry claimed that the bank would also help unlock billions in private sector investment to back the construction of new homes. According to the government, the bank will, among other things, work with mayors and local leaders to develop integrated packages of financial support to deliver their housing and regeneration priorities. It will also deploy some of the £2.5 billion in low-interest loans that were announced in the spending review to support the building of social and affordable homes.
Well, let's take a look at what the government says. They said that the bank will also support SMEs with new lending products and enable developers to unlock large, complex sites through infrastructure finance. And the bank will be a subsidiary of Homes England and backed with 16 billion of financial capacity on top of 6 billion of existing finance to be allocated during this parliament.
Now, these are big numbers, and the government claimed that the new organisation, which will be publicly owned, will be able to bring in £53 billion of additional private investment. And the announcement comes a week on from the government's pledge in the spending review to provide an extra £39 billion in spending over the next decade in order to build those new affordable homes.
Well, the chair of Homes England, that's Pat Ritchie, said that establishing the National Housing Bank as part of Homes England builds on the agency's expertise at providing a wide range of finance to partners and places to unlock the delivery of new housing and mixed-use schemes.
And she added, the National Housing Bank also responds to calls from the housing sector, from mayors and local leaders, to increase the scale of available public and private finance for housing and regeneration, to provide a broader range of flexible debt, equity and guarantee products, and to enable more timely decision-making. Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner said, we're turning the tide on the housing crisis that we inherited, whether that's fixing our broken planning system, investing £39 billion to deliver more social and affordable homes, or, as now, creating a national housing bank to lever in vital investment.
It's not just housing that's a financial concern for the sector. Of course, adult social care has long been an area of concern. And one kind of specific area, it sort of has been delayed for a long time now, really, is that concerning what the government will do about deprivation of liberty. And last week we learnt in a House of Lords debate from the Minister of State for Care that he's not entirely convinced that replacing deprivation of liberty safeguards with the liberty protection safeguards, so this is a move from DOLS to LPS, will achieve the stated objectives of the exercise. Now, speaking during a committee debate on the mental health bill last week, which has been delayed quite substantially, Stephen Kinnock, who's the minister, said that the previous government paused the implementation of the liberty protection safeguards because they decided to focus on other priorities.
Well, that's right, Helen. And Kinnock also said that we've made it clear that we're going to continue with deprivation of liberty safeguards. Basically, we have to look at whether replacing them with liberty protection safeguards will indeed achieve the stated objectives of the exercise. And I'm not entirely convinced about that, he said. It is under review. On supporting patients, the independent mental health advocate will ensure that patients are aware of their rights. Throughout the bill, we are ensuring, Kinnock said, that patients have support by moving to an opt-out model. Additionally, if a patient does not bring a case, they will be referred automatically to the tribunal if a specified period has passed. Patients will be supported in getting tribunal oversight as the referrals are made by a hospital manager.
Well, one Dr. Evans, who was speaking before the Lords, rose to speak to clause 34. Now, this inserts new consultation requirements into section 23 of the Mental Health Act. And the requirements relate to the discharge of individuals detained under parts 2 and 3 of the Act, as well as those subject to community treatment orders or guardianship. Now, Dr. Evans stated that currently under the Act, the responsible clinician has the power to discharge patients detained under sections 2 and 3, as well as unrestricted patients subject to a hospital order under part 3, without any formal requirement to consult other professionals. Now, making the point that this is already considered outdated practice in most clinical settings, where decisions are typically made within the multidisciplinary team, it's not required by law. And by contrast, discharge decisions for restricted patients remain with the Secretary of State for Justice or the Mental Health Tribunal and are not affected by the clause.
Well, precisely, and Dr. Evans highlighted the fact that Clause 34 seeks to change the current situation. It will insert new provisions into Section 23 of the 1983 Act, placing a statutory consultation duty on responsible clinicians, on local authorities, and, in some cases, on the patient's nominated person. The aim of government is to formalise best practice and to ensure that no discharge decision is made unilaterally without appropriate professional oversight.
Well, it's interesting, Dennis, because the new subsection 2A requires the responsible clinician to consult a person who has been professionally concerned with the patient's care or treatment. Now, that's an interesting turn of phrase, because who's going to meet the test of being professionally concerned? I think there's a question mark there. And Dr. Evans also made the point that behind the new proposed subsection 2B, subsection C, which states that when the nominated person, that is the person chosen by the patient to act in their interests, is making a discharge decision under guardianship, they, quote, must consult the responsible local social services authority, which could give rise to legal uncertainty and administrative burdens for families.
Well, the point was made in the debate, Helen, that the provision referred to might be better framed as a duty on the local authority to advise or support the nominated person, rather than the nominated person being under the obligation to seek to consult. Further, that whilst the intent of the new provisions was understood, care needed to be directed towards whether additional steps would build inevitable delays.
Well, I mean, Dennis, the Lords are evidencing clear scrutiny, in my opinion anyway, in terms of unintended consequences of matters such as the appropriateness of placing duties on lay people and the need to be clear about documentation requirements and transparency and safeguarding in decision making. So we'll keep an eye on how that bill progresses. Now let's have some completely different news. Let's look at data, Dennis.
Well, a new data regime for the UK came into force last week as the Data Use and Access Act received royal assent. The Department for Science, Innovation and Technology said that it will have a significant effect on public services and pump £10 billion into the national economy over the next decade. The Information Commissioner's Office said that the changes to the law include clarifying how personal information can be used for research, lifting restrictions on some automated decision-making, allowing charities to send people electronic mail marketing without consent in certain circumstances, and it will require organisations to have a data protection complaints procedure. And it will introduce a new lawful basis of recognised legitimate interests.
Well, the department have said that they believe it will also reduce bureaucracy in policing, speed up work on public infrastructure such as roadworks. That would be nice. The Act formalises the creation of the National Underground Asset Register, and that's a map of the country's underground pipes and cables. And the department added that the Act boosts the development of technology such as price comparison apps by broadening the access that third parties like energy suppliers have to consumer data.
And turning to smarter working, Technology Secretary Peter Kyle said, for too long previous governments have been sitting on a goldmine of data, wasting a powerful resource which can be used to help families juggle food costs, slash tedious life admin, and make our NHS and police work smarter. These new laws will finally unleash that power for hard-working people, putting cash back in pockets and boosting vital public services, all part of our plan for change, he said. And the Information Commissioner's Office has published guidance on the Act covering what it means for organisations, for changes for data protection experts, and how it will affect the public generally. Helen.
Well, I want to turn back now to the Department of Health and Social Care issues. To the Department of Social Health and Social Care, because they've issued a code of practice on standards of training on learning disability and autism. Now, the department has set this code of practice, setting out standards for training on, learning disability and autism for Care Quality Commission, registered health and social care providers and their staff. Now, the Oliver McGowan mandatory training on learning disability and autism is named after a teenager who died in 2016 after having a severe reaction to medication, which was given to him against his family's wishes. Now, the department said that those with a learning disability or autistic people face poorer health outcomes than the general population, and it's crucial that health and social care staff have the right knowledge and skills to tackle these inequalities.
The code highlights that according to recent data, on average, males with a learning disability die 19 years younger than males from the general population, and females 23 years younger than females from the general population. In 2022, 42% of deaths of people with a learning disability were rated as avoidable, in comparison to 22% for the general population.
It's so sad. The code introduces the statutory requirement for training on learning disability and autism as an important lever in achieving cultural change. And the requirement aims to ensure that staff working at all levels across the diverse settings that make up the health and social care sectors receive high quality and appropriate training on learning disability and autism. And Section 1 of the code sets out the 4 standards for training that must be met by registered providers. To ensure that health and social care staff receive training appropriate for their role, it is essential that all registered providers read and consider the whole code and its application to their staff, and not just selective parts.
And Helen, the Care Quality Commission are responsible for assessing compliance with the registration requirements set out in the 2014 regulations. The CQC will take the code into account and how registered providers are meeting and complying with the regulatory requirements. It will do this in a way which considers the risk of inappropriate care or treatment and the improper interaction with people with a learning disability and also autistic people.
Wondering if there's an opportunity for local authorities here to embed something in their contract provisions in relation to providers.
Indeed.
As a sort of belt and braces. Well, Stephen Kinnock, who I mentioned earlier, the Minister of State for Care, has said in response, quote, our ambition is for the code to guide our health and adult social care services and staff to have the right attitudes, skills and culture to deliver care and support that is safe, appropriate and tailored to people with a disability and autistic people. And whilst we have seen progress, we still have a long way to go to achieve our objectives. To drive tangible and sustainable change, we will need genuine partnership between senior leaders and staff in health and social care services, and crucially, the people who draw on care support to build a health and care system that works better for everyone and puts people first. And I, for one, very much hope that objective is achieved.
Indeed.
And on that note, that's it for another edition of the podcast. You can read more on the items discussed today and many more besides by going to bulletin number 24, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And from me too. Bye now.